For those of you who are not familiar with this, in the United States, we have a program called 211. If you're familiar with 911, which is the emergency number, right? If you're bleeding or get hit by a car, you call 911 and the ambulance comes. 211 is a non-emergency number that you can call to learn about state services. And in the Gulf region, so states like Florida and Louisiana, where there are hurricanes, 211 handles a lot of questions about disaster assistance. So they have a call center where people can call 211 and ask questions like, do I need to evacuate? Is there clean water around that I can get? Where can I get emergency food? What do we do with pets during an evacuation? Where do we get gas? All those sorts of things. These call centers, as you can imagine, are overwhelmed during a hurricane. And so 211 sought our help to build some kind of digital solution to address this. So what did we build? The solution that we built was an AI-enabled chatbot that was trained on historical calls from past emergencies that would be able to be deployed in a cloud environment that was accessible through a mobile and web application for the next hurricane that came. How was I an individual contributor to this project? I developed design sessions that I was able to lead with the client. I managed the budget and the project management tool for this project. I led weekly status updates with the client, and I developed the handoff plan. So any kind of question that said something like, tell us about a project you worked on, or point to a time where you had to do some project management, or how do you approach working on a team, right? I could pull from this because it has my individual contribution as a project manager, right? I also have leadership skills that I can point to on this project. So what are the leadership things that I did? I managed a relationship with the client. I dealt with client demands. I delivered all presentations, right? So I spoke to large groups of people. I trained trainers. I trained end users, right? I was able to engage with high-level stakeholders, including executive directors, so that they understood the value of this project. And I drove the success of this project by making sure that it would live on once we were gone. So what do I do with these boxes, right? So I alluded to this a little bit earlier. I don't necessarily tell this whole story from start to finish in one go, because as you just heard, it's a little bit long. Having me speak for 5 minutes to answer a question is a lot. But once I've given the description and the technical solution, I can come back to this when there are relevant questions. So maybe question number 1, I just focus on the individual contribution. But if there's another question that comes up about, tell me about a time when you had to deal with a difficult client, boom, I've got it right here. Or tell us about a time where you had to communicate something technical to a non-technical audience. Boom, I've got that story already written out. I can pull it off the shelf and I can speak to it very quickly because I've already laid the foundation of that story. And this is how you really set yourself up for success, right? These boxes help you define the what. So all I have to do is go to that story that I already know, I've written, I have it memorized, I know the words. I just have to tell it and focus on the how that I do it in a compelling way. So I'm not going to go super deep into my other examples, but this is obviously an example where I highlight project management and really kind of more the product side of things. I also have stories that highlight my technical skills. So I know a lot of folks on this call are engineers, are developers, are coders, are designers, right? Their bread and butter is building things. So you definitely want to be able to speak to your technical capabilities. Again, this is not where you describe the intricacies of building back propagation for a neural network, right? You need to take it up a level and know your audience, right? If you're talking to a business owner or senior leadership, you want to be very light on your technical talk here, right? On your technical jargon. But if you're talking to an engineer or a senior engineer, it's okay to start throwing out some of those words, right? So for this example, I was a data scientist and technical lead on an object detection model or application that we built. And I primarily trained the model. If I'm speaking to a technical person, I will talk about the technical solution and say, we leveraged TensorFlow's Model Zoo, right? I might talk about some of the tools that we used, but I'm not going to get into super detail. This isn't the time to prove your technical skills. This is the time to prove you know how to communicate your technical skills. And again, I break it down in terms of individual contribution. That can be technical, right? If you wrote a script, if you trained a model, if you built an API, all of that can happen in your individual contribution. Again, even if you've only been a technical person and you've only written code, you still have leadership skills. Think about, when did you speak up to your project manager, right? How did you engage with your team around you to make sure that you were delivering value? That's leadership, right? And then the final example I have, notice the leadership box is blank. I go to this story when people just want a cut and dry, tell me about a project, right? This is my very strong individual contribution story. So if there's a question about teamwork or overcoming a challenge, things like that, I'll go to this as one of my go-tos. So I definitely want to open it up for questions about the framework. Or Purva, do you want to interject here with anything based on my examples?
This all looks comprehensive, and you mentioned in multiple places that you're only talking about parts of this entire star story, right? So how much time do I allocate? I think what is a reasonable time to respond to a question, and how much time am I spending, say, on a description, on a technical solution, and an IC and the leadership skills? So am I speaking for 3 minutes on description? And so just some highlight, and then afterwards we'll jump to what Akanksha had in mind.
Yeah, so I would say do not speak for more than 4 minutes. That's starting to get long, right? Like people kind of zone out after that. I would say dedicate no longer than 50% of your response to description and technical solution. So if you're going to speak for 4 minutes, that's 1 to 2 minutes on technical solution, because you really want to be highlighting either your leadership or your individual contribution to the project, right? That's really what the behavioral interview is about. Unless a senior engineer pushes you and asks additional questions about the technical solution, right? You want to be introducing the technical solution so that you can be focusing on what you did and how you contributed and or were a leader, depending on how you choose to answer the question. So no more than 50% of the time to description and technical solution.
Got it. I think what you're saying is give just about information and leave room for the interviewer to ask and prod for further questions.
Exactly. Because if they want to know more, and if you're telling a good story, they will ask follow-up questions.
Got it. Okay, that's great. That's great. It shouldn't be too minimal saying that I just worked on ABCD and 3-4 skills, but it should have a bit of meat, just at least a couple of minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, and then leave some room and leeway for the interviewer to dive deep.
Yep.
Got it. Okay, so Akanksha, if you want to speak, you're welcome to speak up since you can unmute yourself. But one of the basic questions everyone gets asked at all level of experience is tell me about yourself. In situations like this, how much do you talk about your projects you have worked, and do you talk about all important projects you have worked on?
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about the in-between time or the networking time for behavioral interviews or interviews in general, right? So your interview is not just when you are sitting down talking to the person. It starts the second you walk on campus to the second you leave. And your interview is with a lot of people. It's with the assistant that gives you your name badge. It's with the person who tells you where the bathroom is. It's with the person who comes down, right? So a lot of these big buildings, and for example, I work on the 7th floor of a building. So when I interview people, I have to go and pick them up, and we have to walk down this really long hall, and then go up an elevator, and then walk down a really long hall again. That's a lot of time to fill. So what do you talk about in that time? This is not time to jump into your projects or give them an overview of who you are. This is light conversation. So again, how do you manage this light conversation? Prepare some stories, right? It doesn't have to be in the framework of what you did, but have things prepared. What are some good topics, right? Be prepared to talk about travel, a recent trip you've been on. As people who are not from this country, you're in the added benefit of being able to either talk about where you're from or your experience being in the United States, right? Ask them questions, right? About what do they like to do? Talk about what you like to do for fun. I promise you, coding is not fun. Like, don't take what do you like to do for fun as a time to talk about some of your coding projects, unless you've done it for something like a nonprofit and it was like coding for social good or something. And then you're talking about the nonprofit, not about the coding. I promise you there's plenty of opportunity for you to talk about how great your coding skills are in those interviews. This is light, right? Another thing that people really love talking about, and I have found this to be like gold, is talk about commuting. People love talking about their commute. How did they get to, ask them, how did you get to work today? Or how do you usually get to work? If they took a train, they're gonna talk about how much they love the train. If they rode their bike, trust me, they're gonna talk about how much they love to ride their bike. If they drove in a car, they are gonna talk about how much they hate traffic. If they don't commute, right? If it's a virtual interview, they're gonna talk about how much they love not having to commute or how much they miss their commute. All that to say, talking about a commute is a great way to fill that space. And then there's always the classic, how's your day going, right? So the final words I kind of want to leave you with in kind of the normal situation of behavioral interviews is practice, practice, practice. Nail that what before you get to the interview. And the way you do that is by talking out loud to yourself. I know it sounds crazy. My boyfriend thinks I'm absolutely insane. I walk around the house talking to myself out loud. For this very presentation, when I was preparing, I was walking around the house talking to myself out loud. I was in the shower, shampooing my hair, practicing this presentation. That's really gonna help you make sure you have the right words when you wanna talk. A note on lunch interviews, eat like a sane human being, don't eat like a savage. This is something I have to remember. I am not a nice eater. Don't talk with your mouth full of food. Don't order something with a lot of sauce, and definitely do not order alcohol. The last thing I want to touch on is, I know a lot of people always ask this. A lot of interviewers will leave time at the end and they'll say, what questions do you have for us? You should always have questions, right? You should never say, nope, I know everything about this company. I have no questions, right? So I have had people tell me that and they did not get the job. Well, and that begs the question, so what are the good questions to ask? Good questions are things like, what does a typical day look like, right? What will be expected of you in the first 60 to 90 days, right? You can ask them about their experience at the company. What brought them to the company? What is it like working for the company? What do they really like about their job? What are they most excited for in the next year? What are some projects they really love? Maybe what are some projects they didn't like working on, right? And of course, how long have they been there? All of those are really great questions to ask. Yeah, so the other big piece of advice I will have for you is make your body big. Before the interview, stretch out, right? If you sit all huddled up, and if you spend or sit in your interview all huddled up, or even before the interview, if you're on your phone, right? If you got your phone here and just looking like this, your body language makes you feel meek and it makes you look meek, which is not how you want to look in an interview. So make sure you are spreading yourself out, right? Stretch before you go into an interview. Sit up straight, have your shoulders back. That opens your lungs so you can speak confidently and speak up, right? I have very strong opinions about people who don't speak up, but if I can't hear you, you're definitely not getting the job. And a good way to do that is opening yourself up. And Apurva's put a really great link here to a TED Talk that talks exactly about this.
Okay, I think that's a great roundup. And we are living in strange times. We are living in special times. We are living in challenging times. And this conversation would not be complete, I think, without you giving us some of the hacks for virtual interviews during the time of COVID. A lot of us, more people than you'll know, guys. Last time we had Rakesh from Twitter who had come, and he got recruited within during in the middle of this COVID period. And I know Twitter is going work from home. Definitely. But Surbi, our co-founder, she just joined Amazon. Her entire onboarding, the first 90 days, is on COVID. So, Krista, what are the do's and don'ts?
Yeah, so I would say one really key thing is wear headphones so that you're not getting any weird feedback. The second thing I would say is make sure you have a phone number as backup. And I actually really like to call into important calls over the phone because sometimes you never know, the internet drops. I don't know where you are, but where I'm at, like I live in the suburbs. So before all of these people used to commute into DC and weren't at home during the day. Now everybody's trying to do video calls all day, every day, and the internet just can't support it. I frequently get kicked off calls. You do not want that happening in the middle of an interview. So make sure you have a phone number that you can call into. So even if the internet drops out, or even if you lose video, you still have audio. Here's a really important one. So in behavioral interviews that are in person, they always talk about looking at the person. It's hard to do that over video. Look at the camera, right? And I've been trying to do this. Don't look at yourself. And definitely, and I'm really bad about this, when you're thinking or talking, don't let your gaze wander past the screen, right? Even though in person it's totally fine to have that where you look away or something like that. On video, it's really weird. So really dedicate your time to looking at the camera and make sure you frame yourself nicely in the screen, right? Nobody wants to have an entire interview like this, right? So make sure you're looking at the camera and it frames your body nicely. Mute when you're not speaking, right? You just want to make sure that no background noise is getting in the way of hearing those questions. Be mindful of time zones, right? You don't want to accidentally miss your meeting because you are in West Coast time and the meeting was Eastern time. Make sure you communicate to the people you live with when you're in an interview so they don't walk in on you, right? You don't want to be interrupted in the middle of this. And on that same note, right, make sure that your background looks reasonable, right? Maybe take down weird posters, things like that. Also, give yourself some lead-in time. Don't stack meetings back to back to back to back because you want to make sure you are on time and prepped for that meeting. So if your meeting that's from 9 to 9:30 runs a little bit over, you're going to miss your 9:30 interview, right? Leave your calendar open before and after to warm up and debrief afterwards. And then the other thing is dress nicely from head to toe. One, you never know when you're going to have to stand up, and it may be very embarrassing if you do. But also, I really believe when you dress nice, you feel nice. And when you feel nice, you act nice, right? So it's really creating that mentality of I'm dressed nice, I'm dressed formally, I will present myself as such.